Leading into that, some of the data, unfortunately, shows that LGBTQAI students are sometimes punished more severely for the action, and the victim is punished more than the perpetrator. I'm not sure how much you've seen that, but how can you speak onto that subject? Because we've seen that disproportionate disciplinary practices if the individual identified as LGBTQ. Such as comments from administrators and teachers saying, well, if you wouldn't act so gay, you wouldn't bring it upon yourself. Well, if you would behave more like quote unquote normal students, it wouldn't happen. You brought it on yourself, things like that. I know that's a really uncomfortable way to put it, but what could you speak on to that subject?
I can't really speak on it as far as like the physical altercations, but just as far as maybe students getting in trouble for PDA or things like that in class or in school. I mean, even just this last year, I've had to have some uncomfortable conversations with admin about my students who are LGBTQ plus getting in trouble for holding their partner's hand or things like that when, you know, there's other students walking down the hallways, like hugging, like, you know, little cheek smooches and stuff, but it's like, they were, you know, some students got sent home for this PDA when other students are just walking around doing it.
This, and we've seen that with the disproportionate, the unequal policies.
Yes, and that level of shame that those students have after that, like you can't even hold, you know, your partner's hand walking down the hallway, like very innocent and sweet, but everyone else can. And then they're also getting this taste of, oh no, is this what my future looks like? Like this is what this is going to look like. And you start to see the fear and the anxiety start.
Yeah, I do want to speak to that just a little bit because it does fall under equality, right? And I think you said that earlier. And so it is important for students, if policies are in place, we want to always encourage students to follow school policy. You know, even if you see, I mean, we are held to that standard even as adults. We have to follow the law. Even when we see others breaking the law, we have to follow it. So if policies are in place, follow the policy. And to that same token, we want to encourage administrators to make sure that policies are equally applied. So we want to make sure policies are equally applied and then that students are treated equally when policies are broken. So that part is very important. So knowing your school policies, whatever your school policy is with PDA, you know, that's important, right? And you do want to make sure. So that could be something that the GSA advocates for, right? You can go to schedule a meeting with your principals, talk to your principals about some concerns where you see policies are not being equally applied. You're right, and then see what type of corrective actions can be put in place. But always go with solutions. So don't just identify the problem. When you go with solutions on how the administrators can help you. Okay? All right.
I think that one of the things that going off of your response too is the tone of how we handle situations. And so while policies might be equal across the board, how they're approached and the tone of which they are approached. Whether they come off homophobic or transphobic in nature, students are going to pick up on. And I think that for our LGBTQ youth, they're a bit more hypersensitive in some instances because they do know that holding hands out in public is contrary to a general social norm. And especially when you're younger and you're living that, it does feel to be a bit more ostracizing in a sense, and so you're already doing that to yourself. Making sure that as an educational leader or administrator that we understand that as we handle these situations with our youth, that we do so through a tone of inclusivity, and we explain thoroughly that, you know, this is something that, you know, despite who you are, who you were doing it with, this will be handled the exact way. And really listen when those situations happen to our students. While I have to make a call to your parent, is there anything you would like for me to know? Or is there anything that I need to keep in mind? A small little question like that would give an educator or educational leader invaluable insight into how that conversation goes, and potentially may even save the life of one of our students.
And I think that's a key point where you say potentially save the life, because unfortunately, there have been instances where, for whatever reason, a teacher either purposely or inadvertently outed a student to their parent with detrimental consequences, and we have to keep that in mind. Where statistically we show that schools that have a GSA, that have those conversations where you are able to bring up the topics and mention, equal treatment, where you're able to answer the questions that the students have as they're learning and as they're discovering, where you give them that safe space to inhabit and to relax and get a break from, all the rest of the negative energy the world throws at you. Statistically, we've seen that students just perform better and do better when there is a GSA or similar organization or group within the school system. So let's talk a bit of how we can encourage that to occur, other than just this presentation to provide that facts and information. But what do you think we can do as individuals? How can we encourage that so that we get more of those organizations within the school systems to help the students, which is really what we're after in the long run, is to help students?
I think that one of the reasons that we were able to successfully found this GSA, I think I said this earlier, is the abundance of data. And so when we talk to administrators, when we talk to school board officials, when we talk to people who may push back, those are all people who look at data on the daily. And so focusing on the demonstrable benefits was one of the things that made the creation, the founding of this particular organization reasonably seamless in the ways that it can be. The thing that we are all here to do as educators, as administrators, as counselors, is to take care of our students. And so when it was met pretty well, when we came forward with data that says this is a better place, a way that we can better serve and better care for and better educate our students, that was really the thing that paved the path well for us.
And I will say, add on there, and we're going to have the resources at the end of the presentation, and the links is GLSEN
Yes.
does provide that information, not only the reports where you can go in and look at that specific information for both nationally, for the state of Louisiana. You can pick Texas, Arkansas, whoever may be listening to this, you can pick your state. But they also have the resources underneath. How do you start a GSA?
Yes,
It's
those were
student-led.
very.
Right.
They were very accessible. They were easy to wrap your head around. It's not a bunch of fluffy jargon. The students could dive into that data. It was presented well, and so it really lent itself to being very useful.
And it's not asking for anything different than any other student organization for any other deal, whether it's the Glee Club or the History
Right.
Society or whatever it might be. It's no different from that.
Every student deserves to find the village that they belong in.
Exactly.
I think to that point too, when we start talking about the villages that our students are coming from, is dispelling the myth that some schools don't have gay kids. I hear that a lot from individuals who are extremely resistant to the idea of having a GSA on campus, because obviously if you have a GSA on campus, you will get gay kids, or kids will turn gay because you have a GSA on your campus. All of these things are absolutely ridiculous. Every single campus has students who are falling in several of those categories. And depending on your school population, there are many of those children out there who may be just really awesome at hiding it because they understand that in order to be safe in that village, they have to conform to a certain way. GSAs don't cause disconformity. They promote inclusivity. and are great for students and faculty also, because we have to also acknowledge the fact that our faculty can also be members of the GSA as well, that those organizations focus on promoting inclusivity through the lens of social equity and data to promote spaces that are safe for everyone, for all marginalized communities and majority communities as well.
And it's also, we say GSA, Gay Straight Alliance, whatever you want to call it. They're also available for students who may have a family member that identifies. It gives them a place to go to, a place to get resources. Right, your best friend, anyone. I know for us, particularly with Pacey, the youth group that Pace started, our big thing at the beginning of the meeting, we don't ask for labels, we don't ask for identifiers. We're not going to ask you why you think you fit in here. It's just we're here for you. If you want to come through the door, you're here. And I think that's the same thing with most GSAs. They don't ask you to provide any information you don't want to provide, but if you feel the resources there and you want to partake of that resource, then you walk through the door.
Right. I'd like to also point out, too, in the GSA clubs that we've seen, it's not just for students who are part of the LGBTQ community. It's also students who want to support an ally, right?
Exactly.
So you don't necessarily have to identify in the LGBTQ community to be part of GSA.
No.
You could just be one of those students who love the movement, want to support, and so it's for allies as well, and the same for teachers. So I do believe that the GSA club is a great way for educators and administrators to get in there, get plugged in, learn the language, learn how to advocate and support the students. Go to the meeting, just go, hang out, and that way you can definitely become more educated on your
And
campuses.
Let me throw into there too, the parents where appropriate. Because if you have a question about what's going, just go look. Go see for yourself, and those questions will go away.
Yeah, it's in our bylaws that we filed that we will not ask for your orientation or gender identity. I will ask for your pronouns so that I call you the right thing. But we also don't have a membership roster, and we chose specifically not to have membership dues. So we've done some fundraising and whatnot, but so we've put those things in place so that if you want to come to a meeting just to see what's happening, nobody has to, you don't have to put your name on the paper, and you don't have to there's no Kool-Aid. So you can just come in, or if your friend is presenting one day and you want to come be there specifically to see one thing, there's
To
no
support.
membership requirement about those things.
I think what I want to speak to for just a moment is the power of the idea of GSA on a campus for someone who grew up in an extremely rural community. That the idea of attending a meeting where anyone may even glean the idea that I was gay at that age would have just been terrifying to me. But knowing the fact that there was a GSA on campus, that there was a place that existed when I was ready to go, and it could have been, I wouldn't have been ready in school. But just knowing that there was a place that was there, ready to accept me at a time that I was ready would have just been a game changer for me, self-esteem wise, safety wise, knowing that there was, if something happened, if I got outed, or one of my best friends said something, or I was having issues with one of the teachers, that there was some place that existed that was going to have my best interests at heart. That would have been an incredible and valuable resource for me as a student.
And that's one of the data points that they mentioned. Now, with the GLSEN School Climate Survey, it's anonymous. Students can go in online and do it now. So they would have students that fill that out. And they mentioned whether they chose to participate or not, the fact that the GSA was on campus was a comforting thought and made them, as you said, made them aware that if they were ready, it was there, and that alone removes some of the anxiety and some of the pressure.
Yeah, I'd like to also dispel a myth that's associated with GSA to parents, because I still get a number of calls, from parents about the LGBT community organizing on campus. The club is not to teach homosexuality. The club does not exist to teach or recruit homosexuality or homo students who are homosexual, right? So the club is there to educate, and as we just pointed out, it's there to teach inclusiveness. So it is a place where you can go to get properly educated on the LGBTQ community if you so desire. But that myth that it's there to teach homosexuality or to recruit, I do want to dispel that myth as a counselor.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I think there's a certain stigma around GSA clubs to certain students. They sometimes identify GSA with people who like certain things that isn't exactly normal and popular media. So, and I've seen that happen in my school a lot. Even from fellow people of the community, they've said they don't want to go to Saga because of weird people. And I think one of the greatest things about this club is that we just don't care. And we accept you for who you are, what you want to wear, what your hair color is, like it doesn't matter. And I think that there's a stigma that only weird people go here, and that's wrong. It doesn't matter if you're weird or not, like nobody cares.
It's the anime.
A lot of people are like, I don't like furries. Nobody cares. This club is for fun. This club is to educate. This club is to have people who support you and love you. And people will think, oh, I don't want to go there because blah, 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 blah. No, we don't do that. We educate. We have many amazing presentations by our club members that educates people on topics they didn't know about. We have times where we just talk to each other and make new friends. It's this big stigma around this club that we're either trying to convert people to homosexuality or that we're just weird people, when it's not. I think what needs to happen is we just normalize it. We're just as normal, like you said, about like a glee club or the drama club. We're just here, and I think that that stigma really needs to just die. It just needs to go away because it's just a club, and I think that that's one of the main problems that people have with it is this big myth or stigma around it when a lot of it's not true.
And I'd like to speak a little bit about so one of the things that I sort of heard is that, once you start this club and you have flags up in your room or this, that, or the other students won't feel comfortable there. And I would like to think that that's not true. In my experience, it is not. I have a very large classroom. I'm a drama teacher, and so there's a bunch of space. So we have lots of things that happen in there. And sometimes I haven't taken down whatever flag the children put up that day for the Saga meeting. And so, during daylight savings time, we had a couple of Muslim students who needed a space to pray, and I have fourth period planning where lunches happen. And so they used my room for prayers, and the pride flag was up. And we had an FCA meeting in my room because they needed the space. And we had, various things happen in that same space. And I feel like everyone really is welcome. And I do feel like that is the perception. So another myth that I'd like to dispel is that once you start this, once you're the gay teacher, nobody likes you anymore. Like other people don't want to be there, and I don't think that has been the case in my experience.
Okay. While we're still on the positive, I'd like us to do just the brief statement, whatever each one of you, what do you think still that we can do to encourage safe spaces? And then after you make your statement, we're going to go into another topic, but I don't want to bring the energy down yet. So, let's just go around kind of just that positive, what can we do? And your elevator plug, if you want to call it that, you know what I mean, that 30-second, if I could tell you something, this is what I would tell you.
Okay. I believe that one of the things that we can do to promote inclusive spaces for our students is really just educate our leaders of the benefit of having those spaces and the benefits that it has for all students. Our LGBTQ students are some of our most fragile individuals who need protecting, but building those spaces out not only benefits those individuals, but all individuals on campuses. So committing to building those spaces as leaders and encouraging our other educators or our constituents to see the value in those spaces is, I think, one of the things that we can do.
I think that we have to remember that safe spaces are built on trust. Trust is children need to be able to trust us as educators, as their parents. They need to be able to trust their peers. They need to be able to trust the people who are there, that most of their lives they are told these are who you need to go to when there's issues. I think that those safe spaces quickly become unsafe when children do not feel like they can trust others. And when we don't trust the children, when we don't listen to what they're saying, when we don't trust that when they come to us and they say, this is what's happening to me, this is what I'm feeling, this is who I am, and we just dismiss it, then we're not giving them the chance to be safe. We're not creating those safe spaces.
Well, all I wanted to say was I feel like the best way to making them better environment and things that people can do better is just simply education. I mean, that's the point of a school environment, but the LGBTQ community is one of the most persecuted, but also one of the most misunderstood groups. And I feel like whether it be from teachers or fellow peers or through GSA, a push for making people understand that this is a normal thing and that you're not any different from anybody else by being queer or by having like friends or knowing people that are queer. It doesn't make you any different than anybody else.
I would say get educated. Get educated on how to advocate. Get educated on being able to identify the warning signs when children are in trouble. And get educated on how to become a trusted adult so that you can create a safe space and be that safe space for children when they are in trouble.
I think that creating a safe space as a student is educating your friends. And sometimes we're afraid to educate our friends because we're afraid that they won't be friends with us anymore. We're afraid that they'll be mad at us. But I think the most important thing to create a safe space in your environment is to simply just talk to them. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, it's just talking and creating this relationship between you and your friend where you're like, hey, I want to talk to you about this thing, it's been bothering me, or it's been bothering another student. That's really important. And being able to tell your friends when you're uncomfortable, being able to talk to fellow peers about certain topics is really important, and just educating them. And they might not know what's wrong. They might not know what they're doing is not okay, you know? So it's really just important to just talk and be open and express your feelings in a way that your friends will understand, and then your friends will talk to their friends like that, and it'll create a tighter knit community like that.
And I think the thing that I have to say is the way that I think we can move forward and build those safe spaces is creating a space where you're allowed to be imperfect. One of the things that I do in my classroom frequently is if I overreact or if I say something that I shouldn't have to a student, I did that publicly and I apologize publicly. Mm-hmm. And so I think that one of the things that creates that safe space is not having to meet a standard that you can't. And so allowing people to be a whole three-dimensional human being all of the time, and the whole three-dimensional human being that they are all of the time is I think the thing that makes that space the safest.
Thank you very much. Now, because we need to address this, unfortunately. So we've heard in other states and in our own where they are trying to put legislation through of what they are generally calling the Don't Say Gay bills, where they are stifling our ability to say what we need to say by limiting what people can talk about. Even to the point of if a student approaches a trusted adult and needing to talk about an issue, that they may not be able to talk about that issue. So I'm not really sure what a question would be here, but other than what do we think we can do if we are faced with that situation? What can we do after the fact? But what can we do before the fact? So obviously we can attend school board meetings. We can make our voices heard. We can attend as parents, as educators, as counselors. We can pay attention to what's going on. But in the event that everything that we try doesn't work and we have those policies and actions put into place, what do you think we can still do to support our youth that are very critical, the LGBTQAI youth? I know that's a tough question.
Mm-hmm. Very hard.
Well, hopefully, school will always be a place where students can go and share, what's happening with them, what's happening to them. And so, to that point, focusing on the issue, teaching students how to communicate and focusing on the issue, what's happening to them. And maybe the language is not so centered around their sexual orientation as it is the discrimination they may be feeling or the inequality they may be feeling. Just teaching them how to adequately express how they're being impacted or their feelings, that's important. And that's a work in progress, working with middle school, high schoolers, just teaching them how to communicate effectively. If the language of sexual orientation is taken away from us, we can still, talk about how we're being mistreated, ways that we're being mistreated, terms that are being used that may be offensive. So teaching them to still report and talk to counselors or, like you said, that trusted adult is going to be very critical, even more critical if they're silenced into using certain terms.
And that's a key point for the educators too, that if they approach the issue from that standpoint, there's things that they can still say and things that they can still discuss. And we have that safe outlet of the school counselor because as in any counselor environment, what occurs there is private conversation.
Absolutely. And hopefully, and I'd like to believe that all counselors were prefaced by saying that, what goes on in here stays in here. And so that's important for students to know. And so school counselors are only required to report if you threaten to harm yourself or someone else. But anything outside of that, you're safe, And so I'd like to think that the counselors are creating that relationship and safe space for students to come and talk to. And in many cases, when they come to us, they don't have the words. A part of our job is to sort through it all and give them the words. So then together as a team, we go and figure out how we solve it, But sometimes as school counselors, it really is to help them sort through the emotions, put it to terms. So now let's figure out what we need to do to fix this. So I will encourage students that whatever it is, it doesn't have to be pretty. We're used to looking at things that are not pretty, okay? Just come. We'll put it together. We'll listen and sort through your emotions and give you the terms you need and put it to terms and get to some solutions, okay?
Thank you.
I think my general concern about this recent flood of legislation around the Don't Say Gay issue is the fact that there's a perception around if we speak it, it will become someone's lived existence, and that is just not the case. I think that what this legislation aims to do is to reduce the ranks of the population of people who are the largest advocates for these students, and it's the teachers that they have. And we need to be increasing those individuals who are educated and aware of the issues that this group of students is going through. And so for me, as an educator, I would have my picture, and as I have in the past, a picture of my husband in my classroom, and that is a clear signal to most children who pick up on that, that I am gay. However, for other educators who are allies, who are even more critical than our LGBTQ teachers, because we need, for every one LGBTQ teacher that we need in a school, and we do need them because that's representation, but we need 5 more allies in their place to support the work that needs to be done. I think the legislation sets the stage to silence those individuals, and it's absolutely critical to take that fire of supporting students. If you can no longer legally do that in a place that you work, you must do it in the community that you live in. And there are several ways to do that. You can go to school board meetings, but if it's a state issue, in terms of a state passed law and the legislator, then going to your legislators with data in hand that is readily available, and encourage them to reconsider and amend any legislation that is built to reduce the supports that we have with one of our most fragile populations of students.
Right. What I find most hypocritical about the entire thing is they step forward and claim we're doing this for the safety of the children when the data clearly shows it is detrimental. And it's mind-boggling.
And what we're going to see if that happens is that we are going to have to step up how educators and admin start to respond to students who are, we are going to see an increase in their anxiety and their depression and their self-harm, their distress, in general. And so we need to get people trained. We need to get us stepped up. And I don't mean just one of our PDs that we click through and we go, okay, we did this. No, we need someone there on site. We need to be prepared. Parents of these students need to be prepared, and maybe, if there's a way to even prepare the students themselves, like let teachers know, let teachers speak with the counselors so they know that this is a safe space to direct the children to, that there's certain things we can't say, but that if the counselor can, here's the steps, here's the action we will take.
Absolutely. And we are accustomed to being that middle person between educators and administrators, absolutely. And in most cases, we have just as many visits from teachers as we do our students. It just depends on what's going on. And this is a topic that certainly increased traffic from teachers into our offices because they're struggling. The school counselors will always be an ally when it comes to equality and acceptance.
And we're putting more work on you, but we appreciate it.
But that part, we got it. Yeah, we do. We own that.
So I think that in the same way that you talked earlier about following policies to a letter, I think that one of the things that I've sort of tossed around in my brain is making sure that I know that legislation inside out and backwards and upside down, so that I know that I can both protect myself and my students, and keep supporting the students in the same way that I do. And no problem, I can edit my language. I taught elementary school, and there is a sailor that lives inside of me. I can edit my language. So I 100% would encourage everyone to, make sure that you've read the entire bill, make sure that you understand what is being discussed, because, we're educators and knowledge is power, and I can't talk to my legislators if I haven't read the thing that I'm talking about. And right now, the bulk of this is very broad, and it is very, it's really subjective. And so the ways that those things can get talked about, I can still sit and listen to my kids. I may have to refrain from saying anything, but I can still be the person that lets them come to my classroom when they have something going on. I can still be the person that compliments your green hair, or like, so even if I have to edit my language, I don't think that I'm going to have to edit the person that I am and the educator that I am. So.
And my lasting thought on this too is, and it kind of was inspired by your statement, you know, protect yourself. And I know that there are educators out there that won't be able to turn that advocacy off, that won't be able to, I don't want to say obey, but, you know, respect this legislation. Don't leave yourself out there to the point where your credential is in jeopardy. We cannot afford to lose a quality educator over a piece of legislation that is so anti-student. And so in that sense, if you are in need of support as an educator and you don't know who to turn to, those national organizations that are pro-teacher, pro-student, are critical more than ever to be a part of. And if you find yourself in need of legislation, in need of representation, you need to put yourself in a situation where you can lean on those national organization partners for that resource. No one wants to be in a position to where they are in legal jeopardy or their teaching credential is in jeopardy over being pro-student. And to my knowledge, there are no national pro-student, pro-teacher organizations that are coming out in support of any of this legislation. And so align yourself with a national partner that will support you in case something happens.